Good morning and welcome to Bedhead Devotions. Today we're going to be out of John chapter 6 and starting verse 1 through 14. Before we begin, just want to let you know that if you have a prayer request or a praise, you can leave a comment below. Prayer request, I'd be glad to share that with you. Just leave that comment and I'll definitely lift that up with you. Also, don't forget to like and share. We will want to spread the gospel into this world, so keep that in mind. So we're going to begin with chapter 6, verse 1. And it says, "After these things, Jesus went over the sea, which is the Sea of Tiberias." Now there's about a 6-month gap in between chapter 5 and chapter 6. John the Baptist is now executed. Herod Antipas has taken him out and is now in search of Jesus because of the comments that he had said before. He's raising a ruckus and he wants to start pursuing Jesus. And so after what took place in chapter 5, 6 months has passed, and they crossed over the Sea of Galilee and the Sea of Tiberias. They're the same thing. Why would they give two names for it? Now, pretty simple reasons, actually. One, it shows that this gospel is really written to the Gentiles, because the Jewish people would call this sea the Sea of Gennesaret, and the Sea of Galilee is a Gentile name. The Sea of Tiberias is Herod Antipas actually named it that when he built the city on the edge of the Sea of Tiberias. So those two Gentile names are used here. And it says, "Then a great multitude followed him because they saw his signs which he performed on those who were diseased." Remember yesterday, if you were with us, where Jesus was proclaiming his witness, and he said his witness was greater than John's because of the signs that God had given him the power to do. Well, it looks like those signs are working here because people are starting to follow him. And it says, in verse 3, "And Jesus went up on the mountain, and there he sat with his disciples." And I want us to understand that the reason the people are following them is because Jesus is sending his disciples out. You know, we get the concept of that the disciples were always following Jesus everywhere. Well, they were, but they weren't always together all the time. They went in their separate directions, got food, whatever, and they would talk about Jesus, and they would say, "I'm associated with Jesus, and tell me more about him." And, "Well, we're heading this way, blah, blah, blah. You can come see him," and they are actually sharing Jesus wherever they go. And so you have 12 of these individuals out in the community doing this, and then coming together and walking in this direction, crossing the sea, and they sit down together at the side of this mountain. Now, verse 4 says, "Now the Passover, a feast of the Jews, was near. And Jesus, lifting up his eyes and seeing a great multitude coming toward him, he said to Phillip, 'Where shall we buy bread that these may eat?' But he said this to test him, for he himself knew what he would do." It's teacher time. Jesus is sitting down and he is going to teach a lesson. And the lesson is, take care of those who are around you. Meet their needs. This is a hungry group of people that are here and they are following, and you got to make sure that their needs are met before the ministry can be done. And Philip answers him in verse 7. 200 denarii worth of bread is not sufficient for them, that every one of them may have a little. This response from Philip is typical of human nature. that's not the question. That's not the answer to the question that Jesus answered. Jesus did not look at Philip and say, Philip, how much bread can we buy with the money and resources we have right now? Jesus didn't ask that question, did he? What was his question? His question was, where shall we buy bread that these may eat? Which direction would we go? As a child, I would get in trouble every once in a while. And, you'd do something wrong and you get confronted by it. And the question was, well, what should we do about this? The question to me wasn't, are we going to do something about this? The question is, how are we going to fix this? How are we going to move forward in this? I am directing you and redirecting you and taking care of you and making sure you understand that what you did was wrong. When Jesus asked this question, he's not asking Philip's opinion on what should be done. He is asking Philip's opinion on what he would do. Jesus already knows what is going to be done. And his thought process of we just don't have enough resources to take care of all these people is not okay with Jesus. But Philip isn't alone. It says one of his disciples, Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, said to him, well, there is a lad who has 5 barley loaves and 2 small fish. But what are they among so many? He wasn't identifying us. He identified a source, definitely. But he wasn't saying, well, we can start here. Sometimes all Jesus is looking for is to get our feet moving in a direction that says, I am obedient to your cause. Well, there's some food right here. Where else can we get some more, Jesus? That's all Jesus needed. That's all he needed to feed all those people. Jesus wasn't looking for their opinions. He wasn't looking for their how they feel about the situation. He's looking for their action. And I think sometimes we get caught up in our opinions and our non-action because we don't think that we can do it, that we don't have the resources. And Jesus says, you just show up and I'm going to do a miracle in your life. I'm going to do something great through you. But are you willing to accept that you just have to find a little bit, and that's a sign of obedience to me? Verse 10 says, then Jesus said, make the people sit down. Now there was much grass in this place, so the men sat down in a number about 5,000. So it was obviously more than that, because that's just counting men. And Jesus took the loaves, and when he had given thanks, he distributed them to the disciples, and the disciples to those sitting down, and likewise of the fish, and as much as they wanted. So when they were all filled, he said to the disciples, gather up the fragments that remain, so that nothing is lost. Let's understand how Jesus took care of this miracle. Jesus could have sat down and he could have, first, he didn't need the 5 loaves and 2 fish at all. Through God's blessing and these signs and miracles, he could just poof and everybody would have had their own happy meal in front of them at that time. But that's not how he wanted to work. What he wanted to do, he wanted the disciples to seek the resources, bring them to him. He would bless and multiply them, give them back to the disciples, and the disciples would distribute them to the people and make sure the needs were met on all the people. Why is that so important? It's important because we need to understand that even though we may bring some resources to Jesus, he is the multiplier. He is the one that makes it enough. And it's not just physical food, it is everything. When we identify a need in a person, we need to bring that need of a person to Jesus. When we identify a need in ourselves, we need to bring it to him, and we need to pray before him to take care of it, because he's the multiplier that will take care of that need more abundantly more than what is needed. And then he says, here, I need you to take this and distribute it. You see, the lesson isn't just come to me. The lesson is, come to me, let me multiply it, and I want you to distribute everything that I give to you. And there always is enough for everybody plus. But he says, you know what? Gather up the fragments and bring them to me. Because nothing is to go to waste. Nothing is to go to waste. When Jesus multiplies something in your life, you better make sure it's not going to waste, that you're leaving it off to the side, that you're putting all of your energy into what he is doing in your life. We can never fall short of our obedience to him in those times. He says, gather all the fragments up that nothing is lost. I'm going to give you abundantly more than what you need so that it can handle more than what is out there. But I want you to identify and bring it back to me and give thanks for what has been done. And verse 13 says, therefore they gathered them up and filled 12 baskets with the fragments of the 5 barley loaves, which were left over by those who had eaten. Then those men, when they had seen the sign that Jesus did, said, this is truly a prophet who's come into the world. They're not recognizing him yet, are they? We've jumped forward in the book of John, the crucifixion, where they begin to identify him and identify him. We jump back to where they still don't understand who he is, but they're beginning to make a connection. And they make the connection of a prophet because he multiplied the bread, and that was something that happened with Moses, where God provided the manna. They could have identified it with that. There's nothing that says that's what took place, but they're beginning to see him as a prophet God is blessing him and allowing him to do these things. And that's a first step. That's a first step for people to identify him as the Messiah. A lot of times we want to push him right in and say, he's the Messiah, accept him. But their hearts and minds aren't ready to receive him. And sometimes that one step, that one degree of influence moving them closer to Christ is something that we need to celebrate and thank God for. Because someday the possibility is of them receiving him. They identify him as a prophet today, but tomorrow they could identify him as Messiah. Let's remember that as we talk to people. Basically, that's all we can do is talk to people from a distance now, on the phone, maybe in the grocery store. But let's remember that the influence that we have on them can move them 1 degree closer, 1 degree warmer in their love for Christ, or identifying a love for Christ. And let's remember that we are the ones that are to pray for those people, to bring the need to Christ and say, Lord, help me minister to this person. And go back out at what he gives us and just love on them with the love of Christ. I want to thank you for joining today, and we're going to close with a word of prayer. And like I said, if you have a prayer request, leave a comment down below. Now, if you have a praise, I'd love those too. I'd love to share that with you. But let's close in prayer. Heavenly Father, as we have read this miracle of the 5 loaves and 2 fishes, and it's the only one that's written in all 4 Gospels. It tends to show us that there's an importance to it, something that we need to grasp hold of, a way that Jesus works in the lives of those who don't believe in him, through those who do. And Lord, I just pray that as we are reading these words and we're seeing how this has taken place in this instance with those people, Lord, that we wouldn't form in our head this rigid concept of how you work when we disciple other people or reach out to other people to evangelize to them, Lord. But may we see that this is just a very fluid framework, something that can change and mold, and you can use us in much different ways. But Lord, help us to understand that we bring the need. You bless the need because it's according to your will. And you send us out with that need, with the answer to meet that need. Or you'll meet the need yourself. But through it all, Lord, you're going to use us because that helps us grow and understand who you are and how you want to work in our lives. Lord, may our love for you grow, and may it be the driving force and passion for all that we do for you. I thank you for this day in your love, and I pray you be with us and bless us in it. In Jesus' precious name, amen. Have a great day.